If you're wondering how to build really reusable components, you are in the right place. This is what we're gonna do in this video. These two buttons, as an example for reusable components. So their style is not inherently linked to the button itself. We can pass refs to the button and implement a lot of best practices when it comes to making really reusable React components. Okay, you read the title, so let's create a really reusable React component together. And I will be doing that with a button as an example. I've got some guidelines open here on my left. So I don't forget to show you anything. And we get started by creating a new component for our button. I'm gonna call this button.tsx, gonna initialize this as a TypeScript component, but you can follow along just fine without the interface in regular JavaScript if that's what you prefer, no problem at all. Now for this project, we are gonna need 3 dependencies. They're gonna be called CLSX, that's one we need. Then we need tailwind-merge to optimize our Tailwind classes. And then final one is class-variance-authority to handle conditional Tailwind classes. And obviously I need to add them. So I'm gonna use yarn, but you could also use npm to install these. Remember, it's CLSX, tailwind-merge, and also class variance authority. Now 2 of them we're gonna use for one simple utility function that I'm gonna get to later. And then class variance authority is one we're gonna use right now. So as I just said, we're gonna use it to handle conditional Tailwind classes. And we're gonna import 2 things from class variance authority. First one is gonna be variant props. Now that's gonna be for TypeScript specifically. It's gonna be really, really handy. You're gonna see that in a second. And then we also want CVA, which is a function we can call here at the top level of the component, because we're also going to export it later to handle a certain style variance of our button. Now let me show you the finished product. It's this one right here. So we're not going to focus too heavily on the styling, but you can see these buttons look pretty good and they are really, really reusable. And that is because if I show you the demo code I've got over here and we render out the button, just give it any text, as you can see, there are certain button properties we can pass. First off, we can pass anything that a button normally has, and then we can also pass the size, which is gonna be type safe, by the way, so it's default large or small. We can pass the large size, we can pass the variant, that is also type safe, so that is default, destructive, a ghost button, link button, outline, or subtle. And we define these types right here with CVA. So that's the first step we're gonna do to creating really, really reusable buttons, is calling calling this any name. I'm gonna call this button variants, and then we're gonna call the CVA function. Now the first thing is the base. So these are properties that are always applied to the button no matter what. They are not conditional, and I'm gonna copy over the styles from this button right here just so it looks good in the end. But these are just Tailwind styles. However, they don't have to be Tailwind styles. You can do this without Tailwind as well. Okay, and now after having these styles that will always be applied, we can apply our variants. And these should be wrapped in an object, by the way. So we're gonna have the variants like that. And then here we can pass anything we want, define our custom variants of this component, depending on which different styles we want in it. So I'm gonna define 2 right here just for demonstrational purposes. It's gonna be the default. And then we also probably want, let's do the outline of the button like that. And we also want to wrap these in the variant like that. There we go. So we can later address them. Now these don't have any value yet. I'm going to copy over the default styling of the button. So when you do not pass these properties from the parent component, then the default styles will be applied. So in here, that's mostly layout stuff that is always going to be the same. And then in here go the colors oftentimes. And then for the outline one, I'm going to also copy over the styles just so it does look kind of good in the end like that. And now we have defined 2 variants of our button color. Now we also probably want to define the size, right? And we can define the size right down here. So we can call this whatever we want. I'm gonna do the size default. Let's define the default size. It's gonna be a height of 10, and then also a padding Y of 2 and a padding X of 4. Just a bit of padding. And then let's also do the small button. And I think I changed my keyboard layout just for demonstrational purposes. So the small variant of this button that we're creating is going to be with a height of 9 and a bit less padding applied to it. And don't forget the comma. All right, great. And now if you take a look at what we can also pass, it's the default variance. So when we pass nothing, we need to define what should be the default. And for, there's a lot of type saved here. For the variant, we can pass the default, and then for the size that we can check with Control and Spacebar, by the way, to check all available types, we can also pass the default, and that will just initialize the button as a default always. Now let's export these two components as a named export as button and button variants. And the reason we are also exporting the button variants is so we can always apply the same styles we have to the button, even if we don't render the button component itself. So it makes it even more usable. So say in the page.tsx, we were rendering a link component to something. Now this component, we also need to import from Next.js. If you're following along regular React, that could be any component. And then we could pass the class name. And then here we could pass and I think this is red because it also demands an href to somewhere, and we can't render children like that, and just to get the red lines away. And then here we can pass the button variants and apply any styling that we want. So the same styles that would be applied to this button component by default, we can apply to any other component that we want. And that's the point of exporting the button variants as well. And that is all there is to reusable styles. Now let's get into creating the reusable component itself. First off, we're going to be working with semantically correct HTML. And then secondly, because we're working in TypeScript and want to implement best practices, we're going to extend this interface, the button props, by whatever a React button normally has, right? So if we take a look at the button right now, just get the button in here, any text, just to show you the properties that we have on it. It's just the key. It doesn't receive any props yet because we haven't defined it yet. So we can extend this interface by the we can say the button HTML attributes. So the one that a button normally gets, and then an HTML button element, just extended by that. And now we can see that all properties we can pass to this component are properties that we can pass to any button in React. Now they wouldn't be implemented in the component just yet, but we're gonna get to that in a second. And then also we want to extend this by one more thing, and that is the reason why we imported this variant props right here. So we can also extend this by the variant props. This takes something, and this takes the type of the button variants. So in here we can say type of button variants. And now, as you can see, we can also pass whatever we created as our style button variants. So that would be the size and also the variant. So whatever we've defined as custom variant styles appear in the button variants. Great. And now we need to also pass that to the button component. So let's destructure some stuff right away. That will be the class name, so we can conditionally add to it. That's also going to be the size and the variant that we have defined custom. And then also as the last argument, we're going to receive everything else as the ... props. So you can imagine that as a catch-all. So all other properties that we pass from wherever we render this component right here, so the area busy, area current, that we are not destructuring here, are going to be caught right here in the props. And what we're going to do with them is pass them right onto the button, because we don't really care about them. We just want them to be displayed in the final button. Now we can simplify this code just a bit. We can make this a self-closing tag, because everything else will be included in the props, like the children. So that's really handy. And now let's construct the class name for this button. And in here, we are gonna need the additional two packages that we installed in the beginning. So we're gonna call this utility function that I've showed you in the beginning. It's called CN. So essentially we are merging certain Tailwind classes that we get from Tailwind merge, and then constructing them with the input that we get. And now the great thing that allows us to do is we are able to pass the button variants right in here, and then invoke that with everything that we destructured. That's going to be the variant, the size, and that's also going to be the class name. Now we still need to import this function right here, and we're totally good to go. Now this works just fine. Now we can pass, the size in here. We can say the button should be small. We can also pass the variant. So let's say this button should be an outline button, and we have any text right here. Let me start up the server. Now this might be hosted at localhost 3001, because the demo project is open at localhost 3000. So let's visit this website. Let's see what happens, and we should be able to see the button with any text. Now, yeah, the styling needs to be adjusted because this is made for dark mode. But as I said, the styling is not really the point of the video. We can see the button is an outline button. It looks really good, just conflicts a bit with the background, but that's just a styling issue. Great. Now one more step we can take to make this an even better and more reusable component is passing a ref to this button. So whenever you're working with a button and want a ref to this specific button, it doesn't work yet. So we can't pass a ref, we can pass an item ref, but that's not the same. We want to pass an actual ref, and we cannot do that through props. That doesn't work in React. So what we need to do is create a forward ref. So we are forwarding the ref that we pass to this component. And the way we do that is, first off, we can copy the whole component and then pass a forward ref that we've just imported up here from React. We can invoke that, and that takes the whole component. Now we probably, if we're working in TypeScript, also want to pass two things. And the first one is the HTML button element, so whatever element corresponds to the actual component right here. And then secondly, we want the button props to get type safety for the props that we are passing to it. And what that allows us to do is receive the ref to this button as a second argument of the function. And we can just forward that to this button right here. So whenever we receive a ref from the parent, we can pass that onto the button. Now, if you take a look at the page, if we try to pass a ref right now, that wouldn't work because this button FC with button props is overriding the actual type it should be. So let's save that. And now we can also pass the ref to the button. We could just create a ref up here. So use ref snippet, call this just ref. Very boring. It's going to be initialized as null. And we also want to import that from React. Now that might not work in this project specifically because we're using Next.js and this is not a client component. But if you're following along in regular React, that's not a problem at all. In Next.js, we would have to declare this component as a client component. Not that it really matters. And now we can pass the ref to the button and actually work with this button. So this would be typed as null or HTML button element if you were really careful with your types. Now we could say ref.current and actually have the button in there. And that's it. That's my guide to creating really reusable React components. I hope you understood the process and are able to do this yourself. If you want to take a look at an actual code example, I'm going to link one in the description where I use this component in an open source software. So you can dig in, really take a look at how I've implemented it there. But this is the gist of it to creating really reusable components. All right, that's it. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, leave them below and I'll be happy to answer them. Have a good one and bye-bye.